In a certain town, on a day not necessary to name, a child was born. The place was a workhouse, a grim brick building that stood as a monument to public charity. The boy's mother, a young woman found nameless and destitute on the streets, drew her last breath just moments after he drew his first. She had just enough strength to kiss her newborn child before she died, leaving him an orphan in a world that had offered her nothing but coldness. The parish authorities, with their usual bureaucratic efficiency, named him Oliver Twist. The name was a practical invention by Mr. Bumble, the parish beadle, who kept an alphabetical list of foundlings. Having reached the letter T, Twist was the name assigned. And so Oliver began his life, a nameless, parentless child, a burden on the parish, a small, shivering soul in a vast, uncaring world. For the first 9 years of his life, Oliver was farmed out to a branch workhouse, a place where about 20 or 30 other juvenile offenders against the poor laws were left to the tender mercies of an elderly woman named Mrs. Mon. Here, the children were perpetually hungry, clothed in rags, and learned to survive on the smallest possible portion of the weakest possible food. It was a miserable existence, a long, slow starvation of both body and spirit. On his 9th birthday, Mr. Bumble, the pompous beadle in his cocked hat, arrived to escort Oliver back to the main workhouse. Oliver, small and pale for his age, wept bitterly at leaving the only home he had ever known, miserable as it was. The other children clung to him, their small faces streaked with tears. To them, he was a martyr, being led away to some unknown but surely dreadful fate. Life in the main workhouse was no improvement. Oliver and the other boys were set to the task of picking oakum, their small fingers raw and bleeding. They were fed 3 meager meals of thin gruel a day, with an onion twice a week and half a roll on Sundays. The boys were in a state of chronic starvation, their eyes wild and their bodies wasting away. They talked of food, dreamt of food, and stared with hungry eyes at the copper pot where the gruel was boiled. One day, a council was held among the boys. They were so desperate, so ravenous, that one of them, a tall boy who was not used to this life, swore he would eat one of the smaller boys if he didn't get another basin of gruel. A lot was drawn. The unlucky loser was to go up to the master after supper that evening and ask for more. The lot fell to Oliver Twist. The evening arrived. The boys took their places. The master, in his cook's uniform, ladled out the gruel from the copper. It disappeared in a flash. The boys whispered among themselves and nudged Oliver. He rose from the table, and advancing to the master, basin and spoon in hand, said, in his small, trembling voice, "Please, sir, I want some more." The master was a fat, healthy man, but he turned very pale. "Please, very pale." He stared in stupefied astonishment on the small rebel for some seconds, and then clung for support to the copper. The assistants were paralyzed with wonder, the boys with fear. "What?" said the master at length in a faint voice. "Please, sir," replied Oliver, "I want some more." The master aimed a blow at Oliver's head with the ladle, seized him by the arm, and shrieked for the beadle. Mr. Bumble rushed into the room, followed by the board of well-fed wise gentlemen who managed the workhouse. The crime was reported. He asked for more. Mr. Limpkins, the chairman, exclaimed in horror. For more. The board was in a state of high excitement. This was rebellion. This was a challenge to their authority, to the very system they upheld. It was decided at once that Oliver must be gotten rid of. A bill was posted on the outside of the workhouse gate the next morning, offering a reward of £5 to any man or woman who would take Oliver Twist as an apprentice to any trade, business, or calling. Oliver was locked in a dark room, beaten and displayed as a public example of ingratitude. For a week, he remained a solitary prisoner, crying himself to sleep every night. He saw the world only through a crack in the door. He was brought out for prayers and then locked up again. Every boy who passed him was instructed to taunt and jeer at him. But through it all, a small spark of defiance, of spirit, remained alive within him. Eventually, an offer came from Mr. Sowerbury, the parish undertaker. He was a tall, gaunt man, who dressed in a suit of threadbare black. He looked Oliver over as if he were a piece of merchandise, assessing his small frame for its suitability as a mourner at children's funerals. The board eagerly accepted his proposal. Oliver was led to his new home, a dark, cheerless shop filled with the grim tools of the undertaker's trade. Coffins of all sizes were stacked against the walls. The air was heavy with the scent of sawdust and sorrow. Mrs. Sowerberry, a short, sour-faced woman, greeted him with disdain, complaining about the expense of feeding another mouth. His bed was a makeshift pallet under the shop counter, among the unfinished coffins and funeral draperies. Alone in the dark, surrounded by the silent, empty shells of death, Oliver felt a terror he had never known. The shadows seemed to take on monstrous shapes, and every creak of the old house made him jump. He felt utterly abandoned, a tiny, friendless creature in a vast, terrifying darkness. In this new life, Oliver was treated not as an apprentice but as a drudge. He was fed the scraps left over by the dog, mocked by the other apprentice, Noah Claypole, and scolded constantly by Mrs. Sowerberry. Yet, he performed his duties diligently, his quiet, melancholy face proving to be a valuable asset at funerals, an expression of sorrow that moved the mourners. He was learning the trade of grief. To be continued. Oliver Twist, Part 2.